The hum of the fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, the only sound in the too-quiet hospital room. Machines beeped rhythmically beside the bed, where Amara Jackson lay still, her eyes delicately bandaged, her hands folded on the crisp white sheet. To the casual observer, she looked fragile, a powerful woman undone by tragedy. But behind those gauze wrappings, Amara was wide awake, alert, listening. Every fiber of her was straining to remain motionless as footsteps approached, followed by the low, anxious murmur of her husband, Tariq. "She's not the same," he whispered to the doctor, his voice tight with frustration. "I can't handle her like this." Amara's heart thudded, once hard, her jaw clenched beneath the mask of helplessness. She had suspected something, of course. Instincts honed by boardroom betrayals and years of public life told her to doubt the pretty lies. But hearing it confirmed so quickly, so easily twisted something inside her. The doctor's voice was harder to make out, a hushed murmur of protocol and concern, but Tariq's reply was clearer, sharper. "Look, she's not going to get better. We both know that. Maybe it's time we consider moving her somewhere more permanent. Somewhere where professionals can deal with her. Somewhere where he wouldn't have to." A tear escaped from beneath the corner of one bandage, sliding down her cheek like a betrayal she hadn't authorized. She didn't move. She couldn't afford to. The test had only just begun, and already he'd failed. She had never intended to fake her blindness. But when she awoke after the accident, disoriented, bruised, and disillusioned, the fear that this man, the one who once swore to protect her, had been waiting for a moment, just like this, had sunk its claws deep. So she said nothing. She let them believe the damage was worse than it was. She played the part, and now the performance was paying off. Tariq's voice faded as he stepped into the hallway with the doctor, no doubt to continue plotting his clean escape from a marriage bound by vows he'd already broken in spirit. Amara lay there in the sterile quiet, her mind racing behind closed eyes. Rage battled sorrow in her chest, but neither could touch the steel resolve building beneath them. This was no longer about injury. This was about revelation. She had built empires, survived men with sharper knives than Tariq's careless cruelty. She could survive this too. The door clicked softly shut again, and she heard his footsteps recede, the silence returning like a curtain falling on the end of an ugly scene. She exhaled, just once, slow and measured. She was prepared to lose her sight, not her soul. Amara Jackson had never been one to crumble. At 36, she stood at the pinnacle of a world she had carved out with relentless precision. CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms on the East Coast. She commanded respect in rooms full of men twice her age and twice as skeptical. Her poise, her calm authority, the way she wielded silence like a weapon, none of it came easy. It was built, brick by brick, over the ruins of a childhood where survival was the only currency. Raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on, Amara knew early that no one was coming to save her. Her mother had passed just as Amara entered university, leaving behind no safety net, no inheritance, only a final whispered wish, be bigger than your circumstances. Amara had taken that to heart and never looked back. In public, she was the embodiment of success, cool, elegant, and unshakable. But her private world, the one she kept hidden even from herself sometimes, had begun to crack. 4 years ago, she married Tariq, a man whose smile was smooth as velvet and whose charm disarmed even her fiercest instincts. He'd been everything she thought she needed: supportive, charismatic, eager to celebrate her wins. In the early days, he'd been her rock, attentive, affectionate, the kind of man who looked at her like she was the most extraordinary woman alive. But slowly, subtly, things began to shift. It wasn't the kind of change you could point to on a calendar. It crept in like fog soft at first, then suffocating. Tariq began to question her decisions more. He grew irritated when she worked late. He insisted she didn't need to monitor the company's finances so closely. That's what your team is for, babe. He'd say with a kiss on the forehead. The concern that once felt protective started to feel like control. The support, like surveillance. And through it all, he remained sweet. So damn reasonable. How do you accuse a man of something when he wraps every critique in compliments? It was Remy, her best friend and CFO, who first gave voice to the unease Amara couldn't name. After a routine audit, Remy noticed something off-account transfers that didn't align with board-approved expenses. Small at first, then increasingly bold. When she brought it to Amara, the implication hung between them like smoke. Tariq, he had access, he had charm, he had motive, but Amara wasn't ready to believe it. Not yet. Then came the accident. A routine car service gone wronger, brake failure on a rainy evening. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to send her spinning. When she awoke with blurred vision and light sensitivity, the doctors told her it was temporary. But as she lay in that hospital room, with the world dimmed and her mind ablaze, the truth crystallized in terrifying clarity. This was a gift. A dangerous one, but a gift nonetheless. If she pretended the blindness was permanent, if she let herself become helpless, in his eyes, what would Tariq show her? Not the man he claimed to be, but the man he was when no one was watching. She told no one at first, but the weight of it needed sharing, and Remy was the only person who had never asked her to be anything but herself. Together, they crafted the plan. Only one other person would be brought in, Miss Stella, a sharp-eyed private nurse with no patience for men who talked over women. Stella was skeptical at first, but after one full day with Tariq in the room, she agreed to help, so the charade began. Now, days into her performance, Amara moved carefully through her own home, feigning clumsiness, asking for help she didn't need. She tracked Tariq's movements by sound, by scent, by the way his voice lowered when he didn't think she was listening. And every day, a new layer peeled away. A passive-aggressive remark here, a suspicious phone call there. He had started locking drawers, taking more calls outside. He kept asking if she had finalized her medical proxy. Just in case, he'd say. And each night, when the house finally quieted, when Remy was gone and Stella was asleep, Amara would sit in the dark truly still for the first time that day. In those moments, she let the mask slip, let the questions wash over her. Was this madness, or the only sane response to a man trying to steal her life while smiling at her over breakfast? Tonight, she sat curled in the corner of the guest room she'd claimed as her recovery space. No makeup, no pretense, just a woman and the truth she wasn't ready to face. In the silence, she whispered to herself, voice barely audible, as if afraid the walls might carry the words back to him. I need to know who he is when he thinks I can't see. The night air was thick with stillness when Tariq's voice stirred it. Amara lay curled on the edge of their king-sized bed, eyes shut but ears sharply attuned. He had taken the call in the dim hallway, speaking in a low murmur, but the words, slipped through the thin bedroom door like smoke through a crack. "She won't be a problem for long," he said. "Once we move her to the care home, I'll handle the rest." A silence followed, then a quieter exchange she couldn't quite make out. But it didn't matter, she'd heard enough. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, a slow thunder of betrayal. Move her, handle the rest. The implications settled heavily over her, cold and suffocating. Until that moment, she had played the role of the fragile wife with measured grace, distant. Dazed, her words occasionally slurred, her steps unsure. Everyone had chalked it up to lingering trauma, the aftermath of the accident. Even Tariq, especially Tariq. But now Amara understood something deeper, something darker. Tariq was waiting for her to decline, or perhaps helping her decline. Her breath caught in her throat as she lay completely still, the way one does when prey senses a predator has entered the clearing. Was this his plan all along? To shift her into a facility, strip away her power, maybe even her company, and disappear her quietly from the life they built together? Her thoughts tumbled, colliding in her head, louder than the hum of Tariq's voice returning to the room. She didn't move when the bed dipped under his weight, didn't flinch when his arm curled loosely around her. He sighed, long and low, and she could almost believe it was the sound of a man carrying guilt. Almost later. Beneath the veil of moonlight leaking through the curtains, Amara stirred. Her voice, quiet and even, cut through the quiet. "Would you still love me if I stayed this way forever?" She asked it like a child asking a bedtime question, soft and simple. But everything rode on it, her fear, her suspicion, the last thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, she had misunderstood. There was a pause, too long, the kind of pause that says more than the words that follow. "Of course, baby," Tariq said finally. "Don't say things like that." But his voice was hollow, unconvincing. No warmth, no urgency. It chilled her more than his earlier words had. That's when she knew the man she had loved, trusted, built a future with had never really been hers. Not in the way that mattered. Amara's world didn't shatter in that moment. It sharpened. Everything she had blurred and softened for the past few weeks came into razor focus. Her performance, her slurred speech, her forgetful silences, her glassy stares. It had protected her, hidden her behind a curtain of perceived weakness. Now it would serve a new purpose. She needed more than feelings. She needed facts, proof. And to get it, she'd have to keep acting, keep pretending to be unaware, docile, broken. She'd play the part so well that even Tariq wouldn't suspect a thing. The woman he thought was slipping away was about to become his worst mistake. The days that followed moved slowly, deliberately, like a stage play unfolding for an audience. Of one, Amara remained still, wrapped in gauze and silence, every sense sharpened by necessity. She tracked footsteps, memorized voices, measured every pause and sigh. Her body played the part of helpless patient, but her mind was a roaring machine, churning through everything she witnessed. Tariq moved through the house like a man unburdened, his affection now robotic, his charm slowly uncoiling into something colder. What had once passed as concern now reeked of calculation. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen. One afternoon, just outside her room, she heard a soft giggle, too familiar to be mistaken. Joy, her assistant, whose perfume lingered even after she left, who now stayed late under the pretense of checking on operations. Amara listened as Tariq murmured sweet nothings, low and possessive, into Joy's ear. The unmistakable sound of a kiss landed like a slap. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the ease with which he moved through it. As if it were routine. As if Amara were already gone. Worse still, the lies deepened. Late one night, when Tariq thought she was asleep on the couch, he pulled out her tablet. She could hear the soft taps of the stylus and the low hum of frustration. In his throat, Miss Stella confirmed it later. He'd been copying her digital signature onto a series of internal company documents, wire transfers, legal authorizations, him closer to something. Remy, following her own trail of suspicion, dug deeper and uncovered the truth that made Amara's stomach turn. Tariq was drowning in debt. Lavish spending, risky investments, a failed restaurant venture no one had heard about. It all led to one conclusion. He'd married her not out of love, but as a lifeline. Her status, her wealth, her name, they were his survival strategy. And yet, even as the evidence mounted, Amara wrestled with herself. How had she not seen this? The flashbacks haunted her now. The nights he came home late, smelling of something not quite right. The time she laughed off his jokes about her being too intense or too alpha to be lovable. The way he'd slowly encouraged her to hand over more control, finances, travel, even the hiring of staff like Joy. He hadn't demanded it. He'd just made it seem convenient, easier. That was the cruelty of it, how gently he'd wrapped her in complacency. Miss Stella, ever observant, began to struggle with the ethics of the charade. Her eyes grew tighter, her silences longer, but she stayed loyal. You deserve to know the whole truth, she told Amara one night, holding her hand as if to tether her to something real. And he deserves to hang himself with the rope he doesn't even know you're holding. But it was the overheard conversation that finally broke something inside her. Late evening, a clink of glasses, a whisper from the living room. She stood just behind the cracked door, cloaked in the illusion of blindness. When Tariq leaned close to Joy and said, "Once she's out, I'll take over her shares. She won't even see it coming," literally, he laughed softly at his own joke. That cruel emphasis on the word, literally, like a knife twisting into her back. Amara didn't cry, not right away. She backed away, inch by inch, like a woman escaping a fire she had once mistaken for warmth. In the darkness of her room, she curled into herself, shaking, not with rage, but with grief. Grief for what had been real, if any of it ever was. For the version of her that had trusted this man, for the part of her that had once craved his approval, mistaking his presence for partnership. She had built everything with her own hands, her own mind, but she had chosen him, let him in, let him wrap himself around her life until his betrayal threatened to unravel all of it. The shame was quieter than the heartbreak, but deeper. He hadn't just fooled her. He had hollowed out the space where love was supposed to live and filled it with his ambition. For days, she barely spoke, even to Remy or Stella. The fire inside her dimmed, flickering low as the full weight of what she'd discovered settled onto her shoulders. She was angry. Yes, but it was the sadness that scared her more. Because now she saw the man behind the mask, and worse, she saw herself in the reflection of every ignored instinct, every swallowed doubt. Tariq hadn't stolen her sight, but he had stolen her certainty, and that was the final, brutal truth. This wasn't just about reclaiming her company or exposing his schemes. It was about reclaiming herself, the woman who didn't doubt her gut, the woman who didn't bend for anyone pretending to love her while plotting her fall. And now, that woman was waking up again, beneath layers of hurt. eyes still closed, but sharper than ever. He thought she couldn't see, but Amara had never seen more clearly. The dining room was set like a farewell. Soft candlelight flickered across the table, casting long shadows over fine china and crystal glasses. Amara sat at the head, dressed in muted tones, her signature elegance dulled just enough to play the part. Her dark glasses remained in place, hands folded gently in her lap, body still and composed. She looked every bit the fragile woman the world had come to pity her, woman relinquishing control, saying goodbye to power. But beneath the performance, she was electric, watching, waiting. Tariq arrived first, confident in that too casual way. He wore like cologne. His voice oozed sympathy laced with self-satisfaction. "You look better," he said, as though assessing a prize about to be retired. Minutes later, Joy strutted in like she belonged there, her tones syrupy and mocking, dropping false pity like crumbs. She didn't bother to mask her contempt. To her, Amara was already done, a figurehead being quietly erased. Amara welcomed them with a soft, practiced voice. "Thank you both for coming. I know how hard this must be for you." She turned, her head slowly, as if she couldn't quite place their faces anymore. "I asked you here to finalize the transfer of power of attorney. It's time, I think, to let go." Tariq's grin spread like oil on water. "We only want what's best for you, sweetheart." Across the table, Joy smirked. "It's what she needs. Rest, real care. The company's too much for her now." Amara lowered her head, the portrait of broken dignity. Then, with deliberate softness, she asked, "If I could see again, what would I find, Tariq?" He leaned back in his chair, cocky, careless. "A woman who should have known better," he said, voice slick with triumph. That was the moment. Amara stood slowly. A hush fell over the room like a curtain dropping. She reached up, removed her glasses, and opened her eyes. Sharp, clear, alive. Her gaze locked on Tariq's with unflinching intensity. "And a man," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "who should have never played in the dark." Tariq froze, the color draining from his face as his smirk collapsed. Joy let out a stunned gasp, stepping back like she'd seen a ghost. Amara turned toward the hallway just as Remy entered, flanked by a lawyer and two silent, suited security officers. Behind them, a flat screen lit up, playing footage from the hidden cameras installed over the last 2 weeks. Every whisper, every signature forgery, every damning word was there projected in cold clarity. Tariq staggered to his feet, sputtering, "This is entrapment, this is insane." The lawyer cut in calmly. "Actually, Mr. Jackson, it's premeditated fraud, financial conspiracy, and attempted corporate theft, all documented, and now officially reported." Security stepped forward. Tariq's protests dissolved into curses as they took his arms. Joy, stunned and speechless for the first time, tried to slink away, but Amara's voice stopped her cold. "You're fired," she said flatly, "and I suggest you find better hobbies than sleeping with your boss's husband." The silence that followed was immense. Then the sound of handcuffs. Tariq was led out, his once glossy charm now shattered, dragged down by the weight of his own arrogance. Joy, pale and furious, stumbled behind. Amara stood motionless for a moment, surrounded by the ruins of betrayal, the echoes of every lie she'd swallowed. Her eyes remained dry. There were no tears left for them, no space for mourning something that had never truly existed. Remy stepped forward and caught her in a quiet embrace. Amara didn't collapse in defeat, she'd let go in release. Her body sagged just enough to exhale years of holding it all in. She wasn't broken. She was unburdened. For the first time in months, maybe longer, Amara felt light, clean, free. "You tried to blindside me," she whispered to no one in particular, "but I saw you more clearly than ever." And with that, the game ended. Not with vengeance, but with vision. The courtroom was cold, clinical, nothing like the battleground Amara had prepared for in her mind. But as she took the stand and looked Tariq in the eye one last time, there was no tremble in her voice, no wavering. She told the truth plainly, surgically. Every forged document, every whispered betrayal, every attempt to silence her beneath a cloak of manipulation and false care. Tariq sat expressionless, no longer the charming husband or the polished pretender, just a man undone by his own ambition. The trial ended swiftly, the sentence severe, years behind bars for fraud, conspiracy, and financial abuse. When the gavel struck, it was more than justice, it was release. The media storm was immediate. Headlines splashed her name across every major outlet. Blinded by betrayal, CEO outsmarts husband's scheme. The world devoured her story, part tragedy, part triumph, and, though the attention was dizzying, Amara remained grounded. She didn't need to be a spectacle. She needed to lead. Returning to the company felt like slipping back into armor, only this time it was stronger, forged in fire. She implemented new checks, overhauled executive access, and ensured no one, not even someone she loved, would ever have unchecked power again. Her leadership sharpened, not hardened. There was more empathy now, more space for vulnerability, but never weakness. The board respected her more than ever. Investors rallied. The company surged ahead. In therapy, Amara peeled back the deeper layers, the parts not visible to shareholders or the press. She confronted the quieter lies she'd told herself. "I thought love meant sacrifice," she confessed once, her voice quiet. "But real love doesn't hurt like that. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't celebrate your blindness." The words stung, but saying them was like exhaling something that had long been suffocating her. There were other mended bridges too. She reached out to her younger brother, Elijah once, her closest confidant, until her marriage had slowly edged him out. Tariq hadn't forbidden the relationship, but he'd made it ... inconvenient. Too much tension. Too much competition for her attention. But now, over quiet dinners and long walks, the siblings found their way back to each other. Elijah didn't say, "I told you so." He just hugged her a little longer than usual and said, "It's good to have you back." Miss Stella, whose loyalty never wavered even when discomfort grew heavy, was offered a permanent role as Amara's personal health and wellness consultant. "You kept me grounded when I couldn't trust what I saw," Amara told her. "Now I want you around when I can." And Remy, fierce, brilliant, unshakably loyal, was promoted to Kui. Their bond, once frayed by stress and secrets, was now stronger than ever. Together they rebuilt not just the business, but the trust that made it possible to lead with both strength and heart. Months later, Amara took the stage at a TED-style conference, her first public address since the scandal. The theater was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. She stood in a simple black suit, no dramatic entrances, no carefully choreographed flair. Just Amara, whole, clear dash. Her talk was titled, "The Day I Saw Everything." She didn't recount every detail. The betrayal, the surveillance, the downfall, They were only chapters in a much larger story. Instead, she spoke of silence, of intuition, of what it means to go blind to the things you don't want to see and what it takes to open your eyes again. I thought losing my sight would be the greatest tragedy of my life, she said, voice even. But what I gained was clarity, not just about others, but about myself. I let love convince me to ignore my instincts. I let charm silence the alarms. But survival taught me to listen. And eventually, so did power. And now I lead with both. The audience rose to its feet. But Amara didn't need the applause. She had already won long before the clapping started, because in the end, she hadn't just escaped a liar, she had chosen herself. 1 year later, the hospital smelled the same clean, cold, sterile, but to Amara, it felt like a different world. She moved down the corridor with quiet purpose, no entourage, no pretense. Just her heels against polished tile, her breath steady, her eyes sharp. This was where it began, where the mask first slipped, and the truth started clawing its way too. The surface, she paused, near the same window where she once sat in silence, wrapped in gauze and doubt. Now, sunlight spilled across her face, illuminating the woman she had become. Her reflection stared back, calm and whole, not untouched by pain, but no longer shaped by it. As she turned to leave, a young reporter caught her in passing, nervous, recorder in hand. "Ms. Jackson," he asked, "if you had the choice, would you do it again?" There was no hesitation, no flicker of regret. Amara smiled softly, the kind of smile that comes only after surviving something meant to destroy you. Sometimes, she said, you have to go blind to truly see. She walked away without another word, the corridor stretching behind her like a memory she no longer needed to carry. Her silhouette was strong, upright, grounded in a way few ever are. Not because she had all the answers, but because she had faced the darkest ones and kept walking anyway. As the scene faded to soft light, her voice returned low, steady, full of grace. Pain teaches, betrayal reveals, and healing. That's the quiet revolution.